My wife abandoned me for money, leaving $50K in debt and 2 kids. 6 years later, she came back begging. But I had rebuilt my life, and she never expected what I did to stop her. I'm 38 years old. I work in finance. And the truth is, I need to tell this story because what happened 6 years ago and what's happening now is so absurd that sometimes even I can't believe it. I guess I should start at the beginning, when everything seemed normal, or at least what I thought was normal at the time. I was married to Catherine. We'd been together for like 15 years. We had 2 amazing kids, Matthew and Grace, and we lived in a nice house on the outskirts of the city. I worked at an accounting firm, made good money. Nothing spectacular, but enough for us to live comfortably. You know, vacations once a year, kids in good schools, that kind of thing. Catherine didn't work. She stayed home with the kids, and for a long time that worked out perfectly. The first years were good, really, or at least that's what I remember. We had our problems like any couple, but nothing that seemed serious, nothing that made me think everything was going to explode the way it did. Things started to change when Catherine became friends with a group of women from the neighborhood, like housewives with a lot of money and a lot of free time. At first, I didn't think much of it. I thought it was fine for her to have friends, to go out once in a while. But over time, I started noticing weird things. Suddenly, Catherine needed new clothes every 2 weeks. Not just any clothes, but expensive brands I didn't even know existed. She started complaining about our house, said it was too small, that we needed to remodel the kitchen, that the car we had was embarrassing compared to her friends. I tried to explain that our budget didn't allow for all that we needed to save for the kids' college, but she'd get furious and tell me I had no ambition, that if I really loved her, I'd find a way to give her the lifestyle she deserved. Things got worse when she started using credit cards without control. I'd check the statements and see purchases of thousands of dollars at stores I'd never heard of. Purses that cost more than our mortgage payment. Shoes that were worth what I made in a week. When I'd ask her about it, she'd get defensive and tell me she deserved it, that she'd also worked hard raising the kids, and that I was cheap. We had terrible fights about money. I tried to make her understand that we were getting seriously into debt, that if we kept going like this, we were going to lose the house. But she didn't want to hear any of it. She said her friends lived like that and she didn't see why she couldn't have the same. Looking back, I should have seen it coming, but I guess you never want to believe your marriage is falling apart until it's too late. Catherine started going out more. Sometimes she wouldn't come home until dawn, and when I'd ask where she'd been, she'd tell me with her friends that I was controlling, that she needed her space. The kids started noticing too. Matthew was like 12 at the time and Grace was 8, and they'd ask me why Mom didn't have dinner with us anymore, why she was always in a bad mood, why she didn't play with them like before. I didn't know what to tell them. Honestly, I tried to cover for her and say she was tired, that she had a lot on her mind, but even the kids could tell something wasn't right. And then one day I came home after work. It was a normal Tuesday. I remember I'd stopped at the supermarket to buy stuff for dinner, and the house was weird. Too quiet. The kids were in the living room watching TV. They asked me if they could have pizza because there was nothing prepared, and I told them sure, that I was going to look for their mom first. I went up to our bedroom and saw that Catherine's closet was half empty. Her big suitcase was missing, the one we used for long trips, and on the bed there was an envelope with my name written on it. I couldn't believe it. I thought maybe she'd gone to visit her family or something. But when I opened the envelope and read the note, I literally felt like the floor was opening up beneath my feet. The note was short, like 3 paragraphs, but each word was like a punch. Basically, it said she'd realized she deserved a better life, that she'd met someone who could give her the things I never could, that she needed time to find herself and live the life she'd always dreamed of. And here comes the most absurd part. At the end of the note it said, and I quote this exactly because I'm never going to forget those words, "I'll come back in a few years when I'm ready, and we can be together as a family again." Like she was taking a sabbatical year or something. Like she could just pause her life with us and come back whenever she felt like it. She didn't mention the kids at any point. Didn't ask how we were going to handle this. Didn't leave a phone number where I could contact her. Nothing. She just left. I stood there with the note in my hand. I don't know for how long, and all I could think about was how I was going to explain this to Matthew and Grace. I went downstairs and they looked at me with those faces like, "Did you order the pizza, Dad?" And I had to sit down with them and tell them their mom had gone on a trip for a while. Matthew looked me straight in the eye and said, "She's gone forever, right?" And I couldn't lie to him. I couldn't tell him everything was going to be okay when I myself had no idea what was going to happen. Grace started crying, asking if it was her fault, if Mom had left because she'd gotten bad grades in math. And it broke my heart to have to explain that no, this had nothing to do with them, that Mom just needed time for herself. The first months were absolute hell. I'm not gonna lie. I had to get up at 5 in the morning to make breakfast and lunch for the kids, take them to school, go to work, pick them up after, help them with homework, make dinner, make sure they bathed and went to bed, and all that while trying not to have a nervous breakdown. I had to start working from home, some days because I couldn't handle everything, and my boss, who thank God was a good person, gave me some flexibility when I explained the situation. But the hardest part wasn't the physical, it was the emotional. Seeing my kids ask about their mom every other day, seeing Grace cry at night because she missed her mother, seeing Matthew get furious and say he hated her and hoped she never came back. And on top of all that, we had the money problems Catherine had left behind. When I finally had the courage to check all the accounts and credit cards, I discovered we owed like $50,000, maybe more, between cards, personal loans she'd taken out without me knowing, and late mortgage payments. We were basically bankrupt, and I had no idea how we were going to get out of it. I had to get a second job on weekends, worked as a freelance consultant at night after the kids fell asleep, cut all unnecessary expenses, canceled cable, sold my car and bought a cheaper used one. We stopped going out to eat, stopped doing anything that cost extra money. The kids understood. They were incredible, actually. They never complained that we couldn't do the things we used to do, but I felt terrible for not being able to give them the life they had. 6 months went by without hearing anything from Catherine. Not a call, not a message, nothing. And I decided it was time to move forward officially. I hired a lawyer, who, by the way, charged me a fortune I didn't have but needed, and started the divorce process. Since Catherine had abandoned the family without any kind of communication, the lawyer told me we had a pretty clear case, that I could probably get full custody of the kids without problems. The process took like a year because we had to try to locate her to notify her, but eventually the judge declared the divorce without her presence, like she never showed up, never responded to any notification, just disappeared from our lives. During that time, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I sold the house. I couldn't keep paying the mortgage with all the debts we had, and honestly, I didn't want to keep living there either. Every corner of that house reminded me of Catherine and the life we'd had. I found a quick buyer. We sold with a small profit that I used to pay off most of the debts, and we moved to a smaller town like an hour from where we lived before. The new house was smaller, basically half the size of the previous one. But it was cozy, and the kids each had their own room. And most importantly, it was a fresh start for us. Matthew had to change schools, which was hard for him because he had to leave his friends, but he adapted surprisingly well, and Grace was actually excited about the move. She said it was an adventure. Fast forward to like 2 years after Catherine left. I was in a bookstore on a Saturday afternoon. The kids were with some friends, and I'd decided to take a couple hours for myself, which I rarely did. I was looking for a book in the finance section, because I'm boring like that, and I literally bumped into a woman who was coming in the opposite direction with a pile of books in her hands. The books fell everywhere. We apologized at the same time and started picking them up together. Her name was Lauren. She was a literature teacher at a middle school in town, and when she saw I was looking for a book about investments, she made a sarcastic comment about how that was exactly the opposite of what she was buying, which was like 5 romance novels. We laughed, kept talking, and before I knew it, we'd been chatting in the middle of the bookstore for like an hour about books, work, life in general. I asked for her number, which was really weird for me because I hadn't been out with anyone since Catherine left. Hadn't even thought about the possibility of meeting someone new, but there was something about Lauren that made me feel comfortable, like I could be myself without having to constantly be on guard. We started going out. At first, just occasional coffees and dinners when I could get a babysitter, and then she started meeting the kids. I was very careful with that. I didn't want to introduce someone to Matthew and Grace if I wasn't sure the relationship was going to be serious, but after dating for like 6 months, I felt it was the right time. The kids loved her from the beginning, Grace said. Lauren was the coolest person she'd ever met because she read the same books as her, and Matthew, who at that point was like 15, and in full difficult adolescence, even he admitted Lauren was cool, which was weird at that time because he basically hated all adults. Lauren and I got married 2 years after meeting. It was a small wedding in the backyard of our house, just close family and some friends. Nothing ostentatious or expensive, exactly the opposite of the first wedding I had with Catherine, which had been this huge and ridiculously expensive event. Matthew and Grace were the witnesses, which was important to me. I wanted them to know this was something we were doing as a family, not just Lauren and me. Life finally felt stable again. I'd been promoted at work, was making better money than before, the debts were practically paid off, the kids were doing well in school, Lauren and I were happy. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe easy, that things were going to be okay. And then, 6 years after Catherine left, I got a call on a Sunday morning. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway, and it was her. Her voice sounded exactly the same, like time hadn't passed, and the first thing she said to me, without even a hello or how are you, was, "Who the hell is living in our house?" I was silent for a moment because I couldn't process what I was hearing, and she continued, "I went to the house and there are strange people living there. I need you to explain what's going on." I told her, "Catherine, I sold the house like 5 years ago. We got divorced. It's not our house anymore." She started screaming. "What do you mean you got divorced? What do you mean you sold the house? That was my house." And I told her, as calmly as I could, "You left. We didn't hear from you in 6 years. What did you expect me to do?" She asked me where we were living now. I told her we'd moved to another town, but that I wasn't going to give her the address, and then she asked about the kids. "I want to see them," she said. "They're my children. I have a right to see them." I explained that Matthew was 18 now and Grace was 14, that they could decide for themselves if they wanted to see her or not, but that I honestly doubted it very much. She got hysterical, started screaming that I'd brainwashed them, that I'd turned her children against her, and I simply told her, "Catherine, you left. You decided your new life was more important than them. They were the ones who decided they didn't want to know anything about you." She hung up on me, and I thought that would be the end of it, but oh no, that was just the beginning. The next day she called me again, this time calmer but equally insistent. She told me she'd ended things with the guy she'd left with, that she'd realized she'd made a mistake, that she wanted to be a family again. I told her I was remarried, that I'd moved on with my life, and she basically lost her mind again. She accused me of cheating on her, which was absolutely ridiculous considering she was the one who left with another man, but in her twisted mind I was the cheater because I'd remarried. I told her, "Catherine, we got divorced 5 years ago. I didn't cheat on you. I moved on like any normal person would," and she started screaming that I owed her a chance, that we'd promised to be together forever, that marriage vows were sacred. I reminded her that she was the one who broke those vows when she abandoned her family, but it was like talking to a wall. I talked to Matthew and Grace that night. Told them their mother had been trying to contact me, asked them if they wanted to talk to her. Matthew immediately said no, that she'd stopped being his mother the day she left, that he had no interest in knowing her again. Grace was more conflicted. I could see part of her was curious, but in the end, she also said no, that too much time had passed and she didn't know what she'd say to her if she saw her. I told them it was okay, that I respected their decision and that no one was going to force them to do something they didn't want to. Lauren was incredible during all this. She supported me completely and told the kids she understood if they needed time to process everything, that she was there for them no matter what. Catherine didn't give up. She started calling me every day, sometimes several times a day, left long voicemail messages where she alternated between begging me to give her another chance and yelling at me for being a bad father who was alienating his children. She started texting me too, hundreds of them. Some were sweet and nostalgic, remembering the good times we'd had. Others were aggressive and threatening, saying she was going to fight for custody of the kids, that she was going to sue me for everything I had. I had to block her number eventually. But then she started using different numbers, and when I blocked those too, she created fake social media accounts to try to contact me. The worst part was when she started contacting people we used to know, old friends, neighbors from the neighborhood where we lived, even some of my work colleagues. She told them I'd unfairly kicked her out of the house, that I'd taken her children away, that I'd married another woman while we were still technically married, which was completely false. That basically I was a monster who had destroyed her life. Some of those old friends contacted me to ask what was going on, and I had to explain the whole situation to them, show them the note Catherine had left, the divorce documents, everything. Most believed me and supported me, but there were some who decided to believe her, who thought I must be exaggerating, or that surely there was something more to the story. After like 3 months of this constant harassment, my lawyer recommended I apply for a restraining order. I didn't want to get to that point. Honestly, I thought eventually Catherine would get tired and move on, but things were only getting worse. We compiled all the messages, the calls, testimonies from people she'd contacted, and filed the application. The judge granted it without much problem. Catherine didn't even show up to the hearing, and I thought we could finally have peace. But no, turns out a restraining order just makes someone like Catherine get more creative. She couldn't contact me directly, so she started showing up at places where she knew I'd be. She found me at the supermarket once, started following me through the aisles while screaming that we needed to talk, that I couldn't ignore her forever. I had to call security to get her out. She showed up at Grace's school one day, tried to talk to her when she was leaving. Grace got so scared she started crying and had to call me to pick her up. And the school had to add a note in her file that Catherine didn't have permission to approach her. Every time Catherine violated the restraining order, I reported the incident to the police, but they basically told me they couldn't do much unless she did something physically threatening. The last straw was when she showed up at a work dinner I had with my boss and some important clients. It was at an elegant restaurant in the city. I was there with Lauren because it was one of those events where spouses were invited, and we were in the middle of dinner when Catherine just appeared at our table. I have no idea how she knew we'd be there. Maybe she'd been following me. I don't know. But suddenly there she was, standing next to our table in a bright red dress and sky-high heels, looking directly at Lauren. She started talking very loud so the whole restaurant could hear, saying things like, "So you're the whore who stole my husband, the one who destroyed my family. I hope you're proud of yourself." Lauren went pale. My boss looked like he was in shock. The clients didn't know where to look, and I just stood up and told Catherine to leave immediately, or I was going to call the police. She laughed. Said, "Go ahead, call the police. Tell them your ex-wife is here trying to talk to you. Let's see if they care." I took out my phone and called 911. Told the operator there was someone violating a restraining order and I needed help. And Catherine finally left before the police arrived. But the damage was already done. My boss pulled me aside afterward and asked if everything was okay. I briefly explained the situation, and he was understanding, but I could see he was worried. Like, this is exactly the kind of drama a company doesn't want to have. Lauren was devastated. Felt terrible for being the center of that scene. And I felt guilty for putting her in that position. That was the last time I saw Catherine in person. I filed another police report for violating the restraining order, this time with testimonies from my boss and the others present at the dinner, and finally the police formally cited her. I don't know exactly what happened after that, if she had to pay a fine or what, but the calls and messages stopped. She stopped showing up at random places. Basically disappeared again from our lives. It's been like 6 months since then, and I haven't heard anything from her. Matthew is in college now, studying engineering and doing amazing. He has a girlfriend and a solid group of friends, and he never mentions Catherine. It's like for him she simply doesn't exist. Grace is in high school. She's still a sweet girl, despite everything that's happened. She's on the debate team and wants to study law when she graduates. She says she wants to help other people who are going through difficult family situations. Lauren and I are still happy. We work well as a team, and the kids consider her more their mom than they ever considered Catherine, which is sad but also beautiful in a certain way. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Catherine had never left. if we'd found a way to make the marriage work. But honestly, I think things turned out the way they were supposed to. That version of my life, the one I had with Catherine, was built on an unstable foundation of debts and unrealistic expectations, and a person who was always going to want more than I could give. The life I have now, with Lauren and the kids in our quiet town and our small house, is real, and it's mine, and nobody's going to take it away from me. Last week, Grace told me she considers me the best dad in the world, that she was proud of how I'd handled everything, and that, more than anything else, tells me I made the right decisions.